but we're still lacking. But now we need to figure out where exactly we are, where's the problem, and fix it, and have a better community. Yeah. Thanks for the comment. Thanks so much.
Thank you. One of the highlights of the symposium.
Nous prenons une pause de 10 minutes et reprendre le symposium. S'il vous plaît, veuillez rester dans la salle, manger très vite et on reprend le symposium. Merci. Veuillez prendre place, s'il vous plaît, le symposium va continuer. Merci.
Hey. Is there anyone who has part? Actually, my honor to introduce him. He's a great guy that I've worked with, and he's had more than 15 years. He's worked more than 50 years in the education sector. He's developed strategies and worked to meet a wide variety of challenges and opportunities, from replicating inner-city learning centers to the development of a US-UK exchange program for at-risk youth. Eric has dedicated his career to expand opportunity for young people living in a risk environment. So please help me in welcoming Mr. Eric White, please.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Eric White. I had the real distinct privilege of working with Abe, I guess it was a year and a half or almost 2 years ago. 3 years ago. And can I be candid? He's the hope of Guinea. My wife and I, we have 3 daughters. They're now 16, 10, and 13. And ever since they showed up, I find myself looking for the kind of man that I would want them to choose to partner with. It's just unavoidable being a father of girls. And when I look at somebody like Abe, I think, okay, there's hope for my daughters. So thank you, Abe. As Abe talked about, I've spent the last 20 years of my career principally working in education opportunity. I got my master's degree in Afro-American Studies, where I studied institutional structures and how they impacted the African-American community and vice versa, how the African-American community impacts different institutional structures. So my experience around education and education opportunity has a particular focus on the African-American community in general and African-American boys in particular. And so while we're certainly talking about the Hope of Guinea here, and we're talking about services and educational opportunities to children in another land, what I want to offer is my experience and my perspective from what it's like to be a child growing up in this environment educationally. And hopefully I will defer to you all and the expertise that we've already seen to make the connection between what I'm talking about, I think is based on research, and its implications back in Guinea. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Like I said, I got my master's degree in Afro-American Studies, and I've looked at institutional structures and how they've impacted the African-American community or not. When we look at what's going on today, in particular with boys, and that's something I want to spend a little bit of time on later, we look at boys, our educational system is failing our children. There are a series of myths out there that our community, the African American community, has embraced or is bought into that is impacting our children's success. And so I would like to talk a little bit about how we got there, what are some of those myths, and then ultimately how we might be able to respond to that. In 1967, 75% of all African American children were born in two-parent households. In 1967, 85% of African American men graduated from high school in urban environments. In 1967, with a high school degree, a man could go and get a job and provide for his family. In 1967, that was essentially the end of all the Reconstruction, right? We'll talk about the Civil War, the Reconstruction. Certainly a horrible issues around Jim Crow, etc. But there was this steady progression. In addition, there was also the emphasis, and this is important, the emphasis in the American society that education was the responsibility of the society to the benefit of its people. Does that make sense? That both politically, socially, culturally, the attitude was that education was the responsibility of the society to the benefit of the next generation, recognizing that in order for us to survive, he's got to be a success. Right? My hope is that moment right there. Because in 20 years, when he's 27 and 28, and he's got his doctorate, his PhD, his law degree, I'm going to be 80. Right? I'm going to be dependent upon his intelligence, his education, his capacity, his compassion, right? So it was in my self-interest. It was in the society's self-interest. Well, in 1967, things began to change. One was the war on poverty. And the report, I'm drawing a blank on this gentleman's name, I can't think of it. There was a report, it'll become memory in a moment, that looked at the African American family. And in that report in 1967, they said that the African American community was a broken society. It was a broken community as a direct link to the legacy of slavery. However, it ignored the fact that at that point 75% of all children were born in single or in two-parent households. That the institution of marriage was one of the cornerstones of the African American community. But this report came out and said that there was a problem and that it required a governmental solution. As a result of the welfare state, it unintentionally created a schism in the family where it was more economically beneficial for a mother to not have the man in the home. That there was penalty. It disincentivized the African American community to not be married, to not stay together. So this began an unintentional, and some people might say intentional, an effort to impact the African American community and our society. In addition, over the next 10 years, those policies continued to reinforce the removal of two-parent households in the home. Now, that's one. Two, other commercial registrations and regulations began to push the explosion of families, diverse communities, both white and black, and the African American community, push them to the suburbs. Right? Talk about redlining. We've heard of some of these things in terms of homes, where they would redline, where if one African American family bought a home in a particular community, real estate agents would begin to go and knock on the doors of other whites and say, listen, the neighborhood's going to go. And they would force people to sell quickly and drive them out into the suburbs. Again, the question is whether it's intentional or not. That's certainly another conversation. What happened is it took the fundraising, the tax base out of the community. It left those with the least amount of resources and the least amount of access to the political capital in that community left in those environments. As a result of that, it has impacted the schools, where more and more the resources and the influence, I'm going to